You've got case studies and examples that are repeated over and over again across many different businesses where we see that these, we call them ELG deals, right? Deals that are at a minimum influenced, if not sourced by the ecosystem in some way. They're 53% more likely to close. They close 46% faster than deals that were kind of not touched by the ELG playbooks. And the ELG source customers are 58% less likely to churn. And the remarkable thing, and I'm sure we'll come across it at some point, and there's got to be, statistically speaking, there's got to be a distribution. But I can say with confidence right now, and I've looked at many of these businesses, I have never encountered a single business where the ecosystem attached customer base, deal universe, opportunity universe were worse than the ones that were not from that realm.
Join our 5-week course on cloud marketplaces and learn how to tap into the $250 billion spend that enterprises have committed to AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. Discover the future of go-to-market with Roman. During weekly sessions, you'll learn how to leverage this fast-growing channel and network with industry experts and partnership leaders. We'll dive into marketplace strategies, internal buy-in, building relationships with the cloud, and mastering co-sell. Join our upcoming cohort.
Today, we are lucky to have Bob Moore. Bob, CEO of Crossbeam. Bob, excited to have you.
So great to be here, Roman. It's been, we're long overdue. I've been looking forward to this chat.
Serial entrepreneur, leading this partnership ecosystem through Crossbeam over the last couple of years. And it's been incredible growth in how companies do account mapping, even though when you started Crossbeam, I think account mapping wasn't really a new thing, but you sort of reinvented it and made it like really popular. But I think what is really interesting that you've been doing along the ways, you've been tracking evolution of partnerships through like very in-depth content and in-depth survey. I would love to ask you, like, how do you see evolution of partnerships over the last several years that you've been building Crossbeam?
Important thing to know about my take on a lot of this stuff is how I came into the partnership space in general, right? So I, full disclosure that I often give when working with people in the field is that I didn't come to this by having worked as a head of partnerships or a partnership leader inside of an organization previously. I've been the CEO of a few other SaaS companies and obviously, kind of spun up and managed partner teams, but that wasn't really where my depth of expertise was. I'm a data guy, huge data nerd. My last two companies were in the business intelligence and data infrastructure space. And I think a lot of what I learned through those businesses was the value of being able to unlock new proprietary sources of data that can actually help inform and influence the way people make decisions, and then also help them measure the impact of those decisions over time. And the thing that I observed in the partner teams of my past several companies was that there was this extremely unfair, unequitable lack of data among partnership teams and partnership organizations. And the thing that has really changed fairly profoundly in the last 5+ years in the space is that missing data has actually started to show up and become available. And when I talk about missing data, it's not this extremely complicated, big data, deep, data mining, machine learning style stuff. It's the real simple basics. It's the answers to the most important questions that partner teams need to ask. But those questions involve combining their data with the data of their partners, right? Things like how many customers do we have in common and who are they? Or, are my sales reps currently trying to sell to any of the same companies as your sales reps? It's that account mapping information that, you're right, isn't a new concept. That was around for decades before, but was solved previously by emailing spreadsheets around or leaving your laptop open at the bar while your partner's sitting next to you and you go to the restroom, right? Like there's a profound shift that's happened with the emergence of Crossbeam and other kind of account mapping, data mapping platforms that has kind of unearthed a new data layer that has really been inaccessible before. And what comes with that data layer is the fact that it's not in a static spreadsheet, the fact that it's not living inside of a partner manager's head at any given time means that you can actually build other things on top of it. It turns it into a platform play at the same magnitude that the platform plays in every field from sales to marketing to customer success to product to finance to people to everywhere else inside of an organization have been kind of radically changed over the last, call it 15, 20 years of SaaS evolution and iteration. So it's finally time for partner organizations and partner ecosystems, more importantly, to have their shining day in the sun and actually make a cross-functional impact that pierces the bubble of the partner org and kind of the insular partner operations, and actually makes partnerships and what comes out of them significantly more materially important to sales teams, to marketing teams, to product teams, to CEOs, et cetera. And that's been the real big profound change. So, I think, look, even if Crossbeam never existed, I think there is an inevitability of the unearthing of this data just because of the maturity of the API economy and the emergence of the modern data stack. And frankly, things like GDPR and CCPA that have helped kind of put guardrails around not just what's not okay to do, but what is okay to do and what structure you need and what kind of procedures you need in order to properly let data kind of pierce the veil, outside of your company walls. So long-winded answer to say there's there's kind of a new regime from a data standpoint in play, and it just unlocks a whole new mindset around what we can do with this stuff.
Completely agree with you. It's sort of ironic that companies grow through partnerships and they sort of measure partnerships typically through revenue, right, lens. And at the same time, they hadn't had like a good data to back the story or kind of to understand. As a result, a lot of partnerships kind of struggled, and I think they did. Some of them continue to struggle, but something like visibly changed over the last couple of years. Like you mentioned, I think there's two sides of the story, and I would like to ask your sort of opinion. So, like what I see through explaining partnerships and partner insights is that sort of survey after survey shows that companies believe in ecosystem more. They invest in ecosystem more. They get revenue more from ecosystem, but at the same time, I think it's not easy. It's like a conversation after conversation that I'm having with partnership leaders is that it's not really trivial. It's not like you turn a switch and you start partnerships and everything's going to be great. So I would love to ask you, like, what is a sort of both sides of the stories that you see, and like what are the factors that makes you sort of believe that that this is like a real trend which is going up?
There's so much to unpack here because one way of looking at it is what we have in this moment is this enormous amount of opportunity for all the reasons that I just mentioned for partner ecosystems and the people who are responsible for building and scaling them to kind of have their moment in the sun, right? And to, kind of increase the extent to which they're a force multiplier for everything else going on in a business. And, throughout history, there have been all kinds of different movements that have emerged that have been like the cool thing in the business world for a moment that almost go through their own version of a hype cycle, right? And you see this in different kinds of technologies, but you also see it in different kind of practitioners. And I think if you look back to, the early 2010s, SDRs and outbound outreach, right, at scale, right, had their moment in the sun, and more recently, I'd say that product-led growth, right, has been like a huge movement and kind of a mentality and a philosophy around, yeah, and absolutely. And even some of these things happen in parallel, right? Like at the same time as maybe like, marketing automation and ABM kind of having a big wave, like customer success also, right? Like the work that Gainsight and Nick Mehta over there were able to do in and around that persona and that work really, really elevated things. And I think we're in this moment around partner ecosystems where we're in the early innings of it, but you can we just see it in our own market demand at Crossbeam, right? The amount of inbound interest from large enterprises that are saying, hey, we want to do more here. We believe in this. We want to invest in it. It's wildly, radically different than it was even 3 or 4 years ago. So all of that's really true and interesting, but it suffers from all the same problems that any given hype cycle suffers from, which is like sooner or later, you kind of got to pay the piper and actually deliver on this. And what happens when you start to pull people together around a unified strategy for deploying partner ecosystems toward growth is that you bring up the baggage of the last 50 to 100 years that comes with the just how broad the word partnerships is. So, we've done some blogging on this subject, right? Like the alphabet soup that a new expert needs to pick up in order to become proficient in the language of partnerships is just unbelievable and almost unfair, right? It may seem like second nature to anybody that's been in partnerships for a little while, but needing to be able to parse through the jargon and the acronyms of the dozens of different kinds of partnerships. You've got your VARs and your MSPs, you got your OEMs, you got your SIs, but are they RSIs or are they GSIs? And what about ISV partnerships? You mean tech partnerships? Do they live in an app store or a marketplace or an integration ecosystem? Like the jargon factory that has been running around partnerships and collaboration across company lines over the course of the last several decades has, I don't think through any malice, right? But just through a lack of vision and alignment among the players in that space, have put up walls around the practice of being good at this craft, and has ended up being a little bit of like a gatekeeping mechanism that's kind of made it hard for other people to understand what the heck is going on in this world when people that are in it are talking about it. And this happens in a lot of different tech fields, but it's a little more rare in something that's so potentially influential to the go-to-market side, right? Like, groups of engineers that talk about different programming languages and practices have all kinds of, bespoke jargony language that comes into play. But, I think the universe of selling and marketing has done a good job of like, there's a lot of vocabulary, but it all tends to eventually like streamline into these big movements and these big areas of broad-ranging classifications. Like you've got your inbound and you've got your outbound. You've got demand generation. These big umbrella terms, and partnerships. If two CEOs are sitting around a dinner table and they're both talking about these strategies that are working inside of their businesses, they could both be talking about a partnership or ecosystem strategy that's working, be using completely different language, not understanding what the other one is saying, and not realizing that they're actually running the same playbook at the same time, or some flavor of it. And this is where we've been talking a lot this year, and will be for the coming decade, about this concept of ecosystem-led growth, which is really designed to be a bit of an umbrella term to capture the totality of these modern playbooks through which partner ecosystems can be leveraged to drive growth inside of a business. And hopefully not discard the vocabulary and the jargon of the past, but provide just a simple central framework that non-partnership executives, that the chief revenue officers, the chief financial officers, the CEOs, the board members can use when talking about the wins and the success of this stuff, to make it to make evident the sameness of this investment area. And what we hopefully can do in that work is make it so that this kind of partner paradox that you speak to, right, which is that everybody knows this stuff is great, but it's a grind to get people bought in and educate people on it and like pull it forward in an organization. If we can do for ecosystem-led growth, what was done at a time for predictable revenue outbound strategy for SDRs, or for PLG over the kind of pandemic low interest rate area, or for customer success kind of in between those two, what we can hopefully do is elevate the conversation so that it makes sense intuitively and is standardized among the people that are kind of making these big calls about where to point resources and investments. And I think that that's hopefully something that can help, if nothing else, pull together the language that we use around what it means to be doing the right thing in investing in these practices.
Now that you mentioned ecosystem-led growth, I have your book, right, which I got, and it's signed.
Hey, all right, you got the advanced copy. Yeah, that's our super note edition.
I think it's great and good that you are supporting this movement with like very specific sort of playbooks and frameworks, right? And also you started Ecosystem Alliance. Would love to hear a little bit more about that. Like, how do you envision that? Like, what kind of prompted you to start? I mean, obviously you just explained, but would love to go a little bit deeper into that, and then we'll maybe focus more on metrics. How do we measure partnerships? Data, I think, is very interesting as well. But let's talk about ecosystem alliance. Like, what's been happening there?
It was really excited about this, and this all came together around our annual industry summit, which is called Supernode, which just happened in June. And yeah, thanks for mentioning the book. So a little context there. We signed a book deal with Wiley. The official book is going to hit bookshelves worldwide in March of 2024, but we did get permission to do a really limited preprint, and we gave folks that came to Supernode and to our recent London event that we did with Stripe those advanced copies. So you've got, hopefully someday you'll be able to sell that for 50 cents or something on eBay, but you got a real collector's item there. But yeah, the core concept in the book is, it was really, really, really important to us that the work we did around the space that we're in and the phrase of ecosystem-led growth is in no way a giant commercial for Crossbeam, and in no way something where these playbooks don't work unless you have Crossbeam specifically installed and implemented, right? Like, there are ways to run ELG playbooks where you still do old school email spreadsheets around account mapping, right? Like you get the data out maybe in a less efficient way, maybe in a more old school method. Maybe you use a competitive product, right? Like there's been a whole, flourishing universe of companies in our space that have popped up over the last several years because of the amount of demand that's out there and the success orgs are seeing. Great. And in order to kind of put our money where our mouth is around that, we wanted to say this ecosystem-led growth thing, it's not a key part of our strategy for hitting our revenue numbers in the next year. It's a key part of our strategy for making sure that the time we're spending working on this problem over the next 10 years really matters and really kind of foundationally changes the way that partner ecosystems are viewed and leveraged inside of bigger orgs. And if we are out there beating that drum and saying, calling it Crossbeam-led growth, right, or something like that, there's just something disingenuous and kind of short-term optimized around that. So what we decided to do was to form this industry organization called the ELG Alliance, which pulls together companies who are either offer technology that's in service of people pursuing ELG strategies. So it can be anywhere in the tech stack around partner tech, revenue tech, anything that, kind of this new layer of partner data integrates with or influences or supercharges, but also companies that are big practitioners and early adopters of ELG tactics and techniques and are kind of the shining stars of who are doing this stuff right. And community organizations that, pull people together who are professionals, again, not just in partnerships, but also in revenue at the executive level, et cetera. So it was so nice. We had a universe of companies in mind that we thought might be a good fit. And in the lead up to Supernode, I reached out personally to the leaders at many of those companies, and we ended up with over 40 companies. I was expecting 10. We ended up with over 40 companies that joined the Ecosystem-Led Growth Alliance. And every time we go to an event and we talk about it, or we talk about what it stands for, or what it means to participate in that, we end up with a bunch more that kind of join on. And by the way, interestingly, this includes there are companies on there that are aligned with competitors of ours. There's companies on there that are kind of co-opetition, frenemy style, adjacent, alternative ways of doing this stuff. And that is so powerful and important because, again, if any enduring company is going to be built in service of pushing ecosystem-led growth forward or enabling that, then the space itself needs to have the reach and the addressable market to sustain that. And I'd rather there be 10 companies that are viciously competing with one another, but all at a meaningful scale, than zero, because we kind of toiled away in a bubble, right, where we were all just kind of talking to each other all the time. So the ELG Alliance, ultimately, joining it just kind of means that you subscribe to this belief system around ecosystem-led growth as this efficient, scalable, proprietary set of playbooks that ought to be the primary driver of how companies grow in the coming decades, and that you're going to use the language, right? You're going to talk about ELG. You're going to, when you're talking about this stuff and these strategies and the way you do it, you're going to put it under the banner of ecosystem-led growth. And our megaphones, our voices all combined with one another, talking about this stuff that we're already doing and this momentum that's already present, but using the same vocabulary for it, we hope will just elevate the conversation in a way that hits, kind of pings on the radar screen a little bit bigger and a little bit more noticeably among the CEO communities, among the venture communities, et cetera. And then ultimately among the buyers and the strategists that decide how companies invest. And then, like with all good industry alliances, we kind of win together if that's successful.
It's great that you started this alliance, and what you mentioned about competition in partnership space is really powerful, and I see that myself, and it's really great that people who actually do partnerships, and part of, like, a very important part of partnerships is, I should say, strategic competition. So these practitioners should be involved into elevating the space together. But I think what is interesting is that we've been part of this community, sort of broader, right, online and offline community, where partnership people talk to each other and they sort of like support each other's ideas, and it's great. But how do we spread the knowledge about partnerships and opportunities that partnership can deliver across the organization? I already see that across like different surveys, but I would love to hear your opinion. Like, how do we connect this with marketing? How do we connect with the sales? How do we connect this with board members? Like, what you've been seeing in your experience?
The exciting thing about this question to me is how it's very hard to force what you're describing to happen inorganically, right? It's very hard as a group of industry thinkers or leaders to decide one day, hey, we're going to make all the board members and CEOs care about what we're doing, and we're going to have some really creative, we're going to build an industry alliance or have some awesome marketing or write some kind of book and just like change the hearts and minds of the world, right? I think that's a fool's errand, right? And probably more in the category of an ego trip than it is a successful strategy. The reason why we're putting this energy and this investment and this time into this specific work now is because it's already happening. And what we partner really closely with Pavilion, which is a community organization made up of revenue leaders, heads of sales, chief revenue officers, et cetera. Not necessarily a partnerships community per se, but thousands and thousands of folks that kind of run and manage sales teams and sales organizations in the technology space are in there. And I've been lucky enough to get to go to several executive dinners over the course of the last year, and also I'm attending their conference this fall. And one of the things that I've seen that is just so encouraging and incredible, and that has nothing to do with the fact that I'm there or with the fact that I'm in the room, is I see the conversation about things that fit under the ecosystem-led growth umbrella working really, really well, constantly present in these conversations among sales leaders, among revenue leaders, among CEOs. And it is something that many of them kind of claim victory over as a fundamental part of how their business model works, or as some kind of really creative strategy that has kind of emerged because of, an amazing hire that they made, or an amazing kind of, specific key partner that they rooted their ecosystem with and then built around. And if you zoom out or you kind of ask like the 5 whys behind what's actually going on here and where's the value getting driven from, you get to the same place every single time, which is ultimately that there's been some kind of closeness created with key partners in their ecosystem through which data-driven pathways of connectivity have been established, and then those insights and that knowledge have disseminated their way out into sales teams, individual sellers, marketing teams, et cetera, just through the same pathways you would expect, getting various versions of that data or those workflows into CRM systems or the systems that support them, or the systems of record for those folks. And this is the beauty of like the why now question that you're asking. Again, getting back to the maturity of the API economy, where even a decade ago, it was not a given that you could just integrate two SaaS platforms with each other and have the data flow back and forth by clicking through some approval workflow, right? Or spinning up some particular integration or data pipeline. This is something that has materially changed since the time that I was, founding my first company 10 or 15 years ago. APIs used to be a joke. They used to be really poorly maintained. There were always jokes about the Facebook API and how they just updated and not update the documentation, and like every single app on the entire platform would break right in that first year or two. They were hard to work with. They were hard to manage. It required, it kind of felt like one of these gatekeeping situations, right, among engineers. And over time, it became so clear that data portability and the exchange of data between platforms was something that could create stickiness, it could amplify value, it could create alignment among buyers and customers, that APIs kind of became first-class citizens in terms of the features and functionality of modern platforms. And it's something that legacy platforms, like the cloud CRMs of the world, et cetera, invested so heavily in that they kind of revolutionized the way that they interoperate with their whether it's the app exchange or various app marketplaces or whatever else. So what does that lead to? It leads to two things that matter here incredibly. One of them is the barriers to technology integrations between companies have gone down to almost zero, which means that the number of partners that a company could theoretically have, by virtue of having a shared ideal customer profile, a shared value proposition that exists between companies, a general alignment on wanting to pull people into a stack of integrated technologies where you could co-sell and co-market, et cetera, together. Those barriers dropped so much that every company in the world just had a richer, denser partner ecosystem emerge, especially on the technology partner side, almost overnight. And on the services and channel side, it's relevant too, because while SaaS itself has kind of depressed the amount of money that anybody pays for any individual software tool, there's a whole new services economy built up around how you actually intertwine these things, right? And make them interoperate with each other and deploy that out inside of your company. So, it also kind of amplifies or redefines the way the services world and the channel side works as well. So that's effect number one. But effect number two, that's even more exciting, is that whole effect I talked about earlier of unlocking the data layer and getting all this new data into the hands of these various teams. That couldn't exist without the API economy growing as well. And even things like Crossbeam itself are kind of predicated on the existence of that high degree of data portability, data flexibility, and very, very, very high speed, low latency analytical queries being able to be run to do things like compare disparate data sets and find out what overlaps. So anyway, getting back to my story about being around the table with all these other CEOs and them all talking about their secret playbooks, their secret playbooks are all happening right now related to partnerships and ecosystems, not by coincidence. They're happening because, A, the magnitude of their partner ecosystems and the universe of people that they can be aligned with and drive revenue outcomes together with has just exploded as a result of these changes in the API economy. And the API economy has unlocked the ability to extract data and insights and context from that deeper mesh on which you can now build strategy at your company. Your original question was how do we elevate this into those rooms? And I think my answer is what we need to do is not force the conversation into those rooms because it's already there. I think we have enough in the crossing the chasm graph, right? I think we're far enough to the point of being able to jump over the chasm, right? We're not at the peak, but we're far enough along that it's not just a bunch of weirdos trying this stuff out, or a bunch of fringe, contrarian thinkers saying, "Oh, partnerships is the future." It's mainstream enough that if you get 10 CEOs together, I guarantee you one of them can speak for an hour about how ecosystem-led growth strategies have fundamentally changed their business. They just don't know the words to use because no one's given it to them. And because the gatekeeping around how we talk about these strategies, is mired down in these decades of kind of jargon and confusion and, scar tissue from partner programs that just didn't work or didn't drive ROI a decade ago because of a lack of visibility and data and scalability and platform effects. And it's different now. It's a different ballgame. So I think what we need to do is align around how we talk about this stuff and arm our executives outside of our partner orgs with that language and that level of excitement. And hopefully that's what the book is there to do, right? To become a think piece and talking piece, not to infuse new ideas into people's heads, but to almost create this confirmation effect where people read it and they say, yes, yes, you're talking about the thing that I'm doing, but I haven't been able to articulate it in this way. This is what it is. This is the way forward. And now that we have this grounding, here's how we can expand on it. Here's how we can make it bigger. And I think that's the only way these things come together, right? There's a grassroots momentum building around doing this stuff. And all we're trying to do is create some centers of gravity around how the world looks at it and talks about it.
It's really great explanation and great story. And I would slightly disagree with you in the context that I think this is like a sort of natural evolution of partnerships, right? From they change from how they've been sort of mostly in channel sort of 10 to 20 years ago. Now they kind of added this technology layer, and there's a bunch of different marketing partnerships that sort of emerge in parallel, right? Which clutters the entire space, and it's really difficult for like a new partnership manager just to understand like what's going on between this marketing partnership, technology partnership, channel partnerships, how they tie together, who is like helping whom, where's the money, and I think this creates like this kind of a sort of cloud of tags of different things that you mentioned. I think is great. But I think over time, and you sort of your book is a great example. We will get into more sort of classification and different streams of partnerships, and probably like different playbooks how different partnerships are run as well, right? I think to your point, I started Partner Insight with a simple premise that as the entire economy becomes sort of more interconnected and through technology, it's almost like inevitable that our like sales and marketing will change into more interconnected stuff driven through partnerships. And it's sort of this leads to my next question. You've been tracking how companies measure partnerships through your surveys and sort of internally, and you see like through more than how many 14,000 companies, 15,000 companies you mentioned?
Yeah, over 15,000 now, yeah.
Amazing. Congrats. So like more than 15,000 companies use Crossbeam. How do you see companies measure partnership? Because measurement of partnership is like such a controversial conversation often.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I'll dovetail your comment on our last topic into this one, which is I agree with you about the pathways and kind of the swim lanes into which partnerships will eventually kind of coalesce, right? And that there is not one playbook to rule them all. In fact, there might be very, very different playbooks when you're trying to drive the results in a marketing organization and leverage a partner ecosystem to do it versus a sales organization versus a product organization. And the answer to your question is kind of rooted in your answer to the last question, right? Which is that like the way in which success is measured has a lot to do with where these partner teams are actually nestled inside of the org chart at a business. In some companies, we see this, by the way, in our State of the Partner Ecosystem survey every year. We ask about org chart, we ask about where you report, right? Some companies have a kind of a unified partnership organization that includes technology and channel partnerships and marketplace relationships with the hyperscalers, which is a whole other kind of segment and topic, right? But they're all kind of under one umbrella. And more often than not, when they're combined like that, they sit inside of a revenue organization of some kind. And because of them rolling into sales or rolling into revenue at large, the metrics very often are directly correlated to direct revenue related results. And this is where we get into this terminology of like partner sourced revenue versus partner influenced revenue. And the measurement of those things and the attribution of those things back to partner orgs is a big chunk of, a problem space that we're working on a bunch at Crossbeam, but that ultimately, boils down to how can we measure the impact that this partner universe and the investments we're making in the ecosystem has actually made on our business, right? So those are like really, really key measurements. When you've got a tech partnerships team that is rolled under a product organization, it might look incredibly different. The KPIs may sit in the realm of the adoption of different integrations, the engagement associated with them, even things, when you've got a product team that their North Star metric is the NPS, right, the Net Promoter Score of their customers. The partnership team may be scored on, hey, what's the NPS for people that use this integration? Is it higher or lower or the same as people that don't out there at large in the partner org? And there is one common thread here, which is the thing that's ultimately being measured in one way or another, whether it's that product NPS thing or it's the marketing or the sales piece, is people are just trying to get a sense of the difference between when something happens that is touched by or affected by or kind of within the capture space of the partner ecosystem versus something that's not, and how differently those things look from one another. Now, sure, great, partner sourced revenue sounds like a wonderful metric, right? At its core, these are things we can attribute back to the partner ecosystem and say, without a doubt, there was $1 million of revenue last quarter that was sourced by partners. Fantastic. But any good organization, any good leader in an organization, when you elevate it to the CEO or to the CFO, they're going to say, okay, great, $1 million of partner sourced revenue. I like it. Thank you. What's the customer lifetime value that we expect out of those contracts? How long was the sales cycle? What are the renewal rates a year later on those contracts? Did we have to pay some kind of commission or otherwise lose some kind of other gross margin or have some other embedded cost of goods sold by nature of having sold that partner source contract as opposed to a direct contract? Because there are worlds where you as a business could have an amazing, top level, absolutely measured amount of dollars flowing in from a partner source standpoint, and it actually not be good for your business. The contribution margin could be lower than a direct team or something else, right? So it's when you get to those deeper cuts, you start asking the question, okay, well, how do these things look different? What are the ACVs? What are the sales cycles? What are the win rates? What are the engagement and retention rates? All that kind of stuff. And this is where we start to see stuff we can measure in Crossbeam, which is just like the most exciting stuff that I think is at the root of a lot of these things, right? We've got case studies and examples that are repeated over and over again across many different businesses where we see that these, we call them ELG deals, right? Deals that are kind of at a minimum influenced, if not sourced, by the ecosystem in some way. They're 53% more likely to close. They close 46% faster than deals that were kind of not touched by the ELG playbooks. And the ELG source customers are 58% less likely to churn. And the remarkable thing, and I'm sure we'll come across it at some point, and there's got to be, statistically speaking, there's got to be a distribution. But I can say with confidence right now, and I've looked at many of these businesses, I have never encountered a single business where the ecosystem attached customer base, deal universe, opportunity universe were worse than the ones that were not from that realm, right? And it's extremely intuitive because kind of being within like the capture space of the ecosystem at large, it means you are participating as a stack of technology tools that integrate. It means you're working with service organizations that know how to create a complete value story that includes your product and also the products that are around you into one more holistic value statement that's harder to remove and easier to grow. These deals should be better deals. They're supposed to be better deals. So you talk about how to measure these things and how to care about them. And I think the most shrewd people pound the table and say partner source. And I agree, the magnitude has to be big enough that it matters. But there's this really, really important thing that bubbles beneath the surface of just like driving a top level revenue number, which is like, what's the quality of that revenue? And if we can say with conviction that the quality of that revenue is actually significantly higher than the quality of revenue that's coming in through other channels, that's when you start to be able to make a compelling case that investment needs to be made in growing the amount of ecosystem attached, the amount of ecosystem touch that exists inside of your sales pipeline. And that's where you can start saying, okay, this is where now let's surface the data that we can get from our ecosystem to know which leads we ought to be spending time on, which pockets of the market we have the biggest opportunity in because of the presence of our ecosystem in that addressable market side. And that's the savvy companies that we are seeing are doing those deeper cuts, and they are doing really an analysis, like a quality of revenue analysis on what it is that's coming in the door for them through the ecosystem. It's not.
I agree with you. I profiled a lot of companies, dozens of companies, well known, and all of them actually drive big chunk of revenue. A lot of well-known SaaS companies like Zoom, Atlassian, and like Asana, and many others. They drive huge part of revenue through partnerships, technology partnership, channel partnerships, and so on. And I think just similarly how this entire partner community sort of a little bit focused on the excitement about partnerships. They also like maybe a little bit focused on their fears about that partnerships are not delivering like on time. So I think this type of conversations, this type of metrics help a lot. And thanks so much for sharing them. Kind of conscious of time, I cannot really like let you go today without speaking about data and AI, because you've been in data your entire career, right? So you started with Insight Partners, and then you've been building products around metrics and data. So I'm like, you're currently sitting on a big chunk of data in Crossbeam, and you see how companies sort of interact, which is amazing. But I'm curious, like looking in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, how do you think this AI sort of explosion will influence partnerships, how companies collaborate, and this entire sort of space?
I used to take a lot of pride in, we raised every round of venture that we ever raised at Crossbeam, and our pitch deck never said anything like, it never mentioned the word blockchain, never mentioned Web 3.0, never had, machine learning, and it was the last time around when it was the hot thing that was getting all the venture investment. Like we kind of stayed away from these big hype cycles, and we had a little bit of this weird contrarian take, like, hey, we're going to start a data sharing business in the month after GDPR goes live. Let's go, right? It was not exactly an intuitive thing from those early days, and we kind of stayed away from the big hype cycles. AI is different. I believe in it. There is a very tangible kind of moment that we are in that feels like it's of the same order of magnitude, if not larger, than the emergence of the web browser originally, and then the emergence of the mobile operating system, and this feels like kind of like the third big leap toward interfaces for massively useful information exchange between humans and machines, and it is probably going to pretty fundamentally change the way that we interface with information and access information. So to ignore it would be foolish. I also think that not every company in the world can be or needs to be ChatGPT, or necessarily build its own. Like the solution to participating in the modern AI economy is not to build a chatbot necessarily and put it into your product and make it easier to, we could build a thing in Crossbeam where you type and say, hey, I'd like to share this data with partner X, but only when these conditions are met. Like, sure, we could build that. That does not make us an AI company. I think the thing that's going to emerge once the dust settles a bit on the picks and shovels businesses in AI and the interfaces with which people interact with them, is it's going to become really clear that the quality of your ability to leverage AI to build a better company in a B2B context is going to be directly correlated to your access to, and the AI's access to, the data that it needs to make decisions and take actions. And when it comes to partner ecosystems, that actually positions us extremely well in the modern AI fabric, because some of the richest, most interesting, most important contextual data that you can possibly get your hands on that is specific to your business is that data which is actually extracted from your partner ecosystem and the relationships that exist there, right? Like anybody can go buy, like from a data broker, there's plenty of companies out there, you can give them 30 or 50 grand and they will enrich your data with third party, like, here's a bunch of contacts that work at that company. Here's where the company headquarters is and how many employees they have and whatever else. You can that industry has existed forever. AI consumes that data once and everybody's got it because it's the same data for everybody, right? Those companies sell the same data set over and over and over again. There will be not an enormous proprietary advantage for any given company to tap into that third-party data enrichment. Second party data enrichment is different. That's the data that I get from you because you and I have a actual strategic relationship with each other and an understanding of what fair use of that data and our collaboration around it constitutes. And being able to say, I'm going to have a finely tuned AI driven and assisted set of sales motions and operations and workflows. And one of the things that gets to train that AI is the knowledge and context from my partner ecosystem. No other company on the planet is going to have their version of that AI trained in that way because your data is yours. Like no one has the same partner ecosystem that you do. And it basically means that every company out there, by cultivating a partner ecosystem, is also in tandem cultivating their own proprietary training data set with which they can use and leverage AI to make the best decisions about where to spend time and energy for their business. And that is extremely cool and extremely powerful. And I think it means that the partner ecosystem does not become an AI hive mind in itself. It just becomes a very, very rich and proprietary source of training data, which is going to end up being the real space that differentiation comes from in this modern fabric.
We just chatted recently with Jay McBain, and we talk about the fact that the ability of companies to feed their data into sort of like one source, which will become like a training source for AI, will become a differentiator, right? And kind of ability to work with partners about data will be differentiator as well. So I'm curious, maybe like my last question, like, would you like two parts, sort of like one of them, do you see companies already good enough in terms of exchanging data and leveraging data sort of specifically with partners? And like if you would advise like a CEO of a company, not necessarily around using your product, but generally sort of like leveraging second party data, what would you say to them?
So the good news is that the playbooks are out there, and there are incredible companies doing this already at scale with fantastic results. And those stories are being told more than ever. I would also say that I would estimate that probably somewhere in the range of 5 to 10% of modern companies are actually doing it at that level. So if you're a CEO feeling like you're new to this, you're not the only one. You're in the majority. The question is, do you get in early on this work in a way that allows you to kind of tap into the advantages of being an early adopter and thinker and innovator around the work in ecosystem-led growth. So the place to start is to look at where the most obvious, easy, low-hanging fruit might exist, which is, let's just look at a really basic account mapping matrix between our company and the companies that we at least currently think are the ones that we're most aligned with from a partnership perspective. Whether you have a formal partner program or not, you may have a technology integration, you may just have kind of a general kind of religious alignment with other companies around an ideal customer profile or market messaging or something like that. And it can be very fruitful, even without sharing any raw data at all, to just look at the math of what's the number of customers that we have in common, right? What's the total amount of ARR that overlap represents in terms of my base? Now, okay, I understand that. I understand how much our customer profile overlaps. Let's take a look at our open opportunities in our sales pipeline and see how many of them we have in common. Because if we can see that our overlapping customers are also our best customers and the ones that close faster and the ones that close at a higher ACV, then maybe there's a story to be told or a strategy to be run around our overlapping sales pipeline and how to go after those folks that are in there. And if that's true, let's go a cut deeper and look at who the sales reps are that own those overlapping opportunities. And let's just pick one from each side and say, I've got this sales rep that I think is an innovative glass chewer that'll try some interesting new strategies, and you have one as well. And let's just look at the deals that these two reps have that happen to overlap with one another that are going on right now. And you can run that report, right? Or you can go the other way and say, who are the two reps that have the most overlapping deals between our companies? And that's how you identify the reps. But in any case, you get these humans in a room together, and I guarantee the sparks will fly, right? Because you have this input kind of data-driven evidence that supports your intuition that your two companies win together in a powerful way. And then you have this very actionable limited specific target list of companies through which just the knowledge that they may be evaluating both products at the same time, or even better, the collaboration between the sales reps who are supporting those sales, it's going to make for a better experience for your buyers. It's going to make for a clearer, unified value proposition, and it's going to make for a higher likelihood that you end up winning and winning faster and bigger. And that plays out, and it bears out in the data. And it's a great way to put your money where your mouth is without needing to buy massive systems or use expensive products or integrate it into your CRM. It's like, just dip your toe and see the magic that emerges from there. And then think about, what if we could do this in a scalable way across the entire sales organization? And that's where these systems like Crossbeam start to really, really, help you scale with limited lift.
Such a great advice. Look, I guess just like people have to try ChatGPT, right, and have to try AI, because if they don't, they will get almost out of date, and it's like you're reluctant to use like a computer sort of 20 years ago or something. In the same way, I guess working with partners and working like sort of trying to share data, see what will emerge. Using Crossbeam as well, I think would be sort of great advice for any CEO to get a sense like how it's going. Look, Bob, I guess we had like a really great conversation. I learned a lot myself, and thank you so much for sharing all this like journeys that you have and all these insights. I'm really excited for your book, which is Ecosystem That Grows. And Alliance, and I look forward to having another chat at some point, because I think this entire space is evolving much faster now. Like overlaid with data and AI, I think it will probably accelerate. But let's see. Looking forward to chatting more in the future.
Amazing. Many more great chats to come, and I appreciate the audience and the platform and the thoughtful questions. Can't wait to chat again.